the Sicario horror story. It was the year 2019 that I lived on a ranch called Bella Vista, which was located in the peaks of Veracruz. There I had grown up. Life when I was a child was not easy, because many times my father did not even have enough to feed us. I had 8 siblings. At that time it was normal to have that number of children, although now it is frowned upon, even on my ranch. Bella Vista is a beautiful place, full of vegetation, of trees that look majestic during the day. But at night, they were actually scary. The sound of the leaves moving gave the impression that the place was full of people whispering, and I could even say people lamenting. My mother died when I was 6 years old, because at that time it was difficult to go to the doctor, because it was far away and it was not possible to buy all the medicines to be well. My father now tells us, he says that my mother said that she knew she would die because she was poor. That time was very complicated and sad for my brothers and me. He had 6 male brothers and 2 female sisters. My father worked, and my grandmother Eustalia was the one who took care of us. She was a very angry woman and did not have much compassion for us, even though we had lost my mother. In fact, she even blamed us for her death. Sometimes he could be very cruel to us. My only happiness was my father and my brothers. The one I got along with best was Beto, who had been with me for just 2 years. Most of the time we went out to play, just him and I, but when my grandmother went to buy eggs with a neighbor, we all took the opportunity to play together. Well, just the men, because the girls played separately. My grandmother made us take care of the animals in the field, to go get the corn for tortillas, to the mill, and things that were quite heavy for children my age. My brother Beto had to take care of the sheep at around 6 p.m. and take them home at around 7 p.m. He was accompanied by our pet Tommy, a small mixed-breed dog. He was black, his hair was straight, and he was very mischievous. There was a time when I remember Beto came home running and screaming. He said that he had seen a naked woman levitating in the field among the trees. I was very scared, because I knew that he wasn't lying. He was a child, and he didn't have to. And he also arrived sweating and shaking and very scared. He told me that while he was sitting taking care of the sheep, Tommy, our little dog, suddenly started howling and even urinated out of fear. Then when Beto turned to where he was looking, the dog realized that there was a completely naked woman levitating in the middle of the trees. He said that the woman had her eyes on him, and that he had the feeling that if he didn't run, that woman would catch him. My grandmother scolded him and hit him with a cable when he did that, because she said that he couldn't leave the animals unattended, because they could be stolen. So he sent me or one of my brothers to go get the sheep, but no one wanted to go there because we were very afraid. We didn't want to see that woman. Then the 5 male brothers decided to go for the sheep so that the grandmother would not take out her anger on us by hitting us too. When we arrived at the place, there was nothing. In fact, the atmosphere felt quite normal, but at 7 it was getting dark, and no one liked to be far away from home when that happened. There were many occasions in which that happened. No one understood why, and no one other than Beto had seen that woman. Years passed, and that event was repeated several times. But life was better. My father had gotten a better job, and we could now afford our 3 meals a day, even if that meant seeing my dad every week and having to put up with the bad things of my grandmother Eustalia. That's how the next 3 years went. Everything was calm until I turned 15, when everything got worse. My father became seriously ill, and we had to take him to the hospital. We asked for a loan from a neighbor to be able to pay for the consultation, but they told us that they had to operate on him if we wanted him to be saved. We didn't know what to do. The operation was extremely expensive, and it was impossible for us to get the money. We were very poor people. The days went by, and we didn't know what to do. We had my father home. We took care of him and did everything we could so that he wouldn't suffer, but it was torture to see him like that. My grandmother tried to raise money from the neighbors, but what she raised was not enough for the operation. Besides, my father was a man of the house, who worked and covered the expenses, so everything was very bad. But one day Beto told me that I had to go to the field to solve some things, and the truth is I didn't pay attention to them. After a few hours, when night had fallen, he returned. He told us to prepare my father, that we would take him to the hospital, so that he would have surgery the next day. We were all surprised, and we asked him if he had gotten the money, and he said yes. But when we asked him where he had gotten it from, he told us that it didn't matter. We prepared everything, and the neighbors, who had a very old truck, took us to the nearest hospital. The whole way I wondered where Beto had gotten that money. It didn't make sense, as I'd already said it was almost impossible. No one in the town had that amount. I'm sure my brother was involved in something bad. The next day my father had surgery, and while we were waiting for him to come out, I asked Beto privately where he got the money from. He told me that it didn't matter, that the important thing was that our father would be fine. He also told me that in a year he would turn 18 and that he would start looking for a job to help the family. I decided not to ask anymore because I knew he wasn't going to tell me no matter how much I insisted. As the days passed and my father began to recover, of course he had to spend several days recovering, but we were all more calm and happy because for a moment I thought the same thing would happen to my mother. Everything was fine, and apparently no one remembered to ask Beto where he got that money from. Later, Beto and I went out to look for Tommy, our little dog, because he had escaped. We walked among the big trees and talked a lot, like when we were children. But after a while, we realized that we all in those trees, there were some tents, discarded clothes, and even weapons. My brother told me that they were probably from some cartel, that his friends had told him that they had already arrived in Bella Vista and that they were recruiting people. I got scared and told him to get out of there. He nodded, but stayed a few more minutes watching. It seemed like there was no one. I touched him on the shoulder and repeated that we had to go. On the way back, we were lucky enough to find our pet, so it was all worth it. Every day it seemed better for our family after that, until one day something changed. I realized that my brother Beto was going out more and more and arriving very late. He said it was because he was looking for work, but I knew him well, and I knew there was something more than that. One night, while waiting for Beto, I fell asleep, and in my dreams, I saw, I was face to face with that woman who described what she saw when she wouldn't take care of the sheep. I had never seen her, but something in my dream told me that it was her. But a few seconds later, something woke me up. It was my brother Beto, who moved me strongly. I couldn't see him very well because of the darkness, but I noticed that he was crying and a drop of his sweat fell on my arm. I asked him if he was okay, and he told me no. He told me to go out and that he could tell me outside. We went out and lit ourselves with candle. It was very cold. The wind at the face and the fog gave a terrifying appearance to the field. We sat on some logs, and I asked him what was happening. He told me that he would only tell me because he had confidence in me and that he knew I wouldn't tell anyone. And he also said that he couldn't take it anymore. I listened to him carefully, and he began to tell me that when my father had gotten sick, he had very afraid that the same thing as my mother would happen to him, and that he knew that he couldn't stand being like this, that he wanted to help, find a solution to get the money. He told me that a friend of his who lived in town told him that he could ask the devil to help him, and that if he offered him something juicy enough in return, the devil could help him. When he said that, I opened my eyes surprised and asked him if he was crazy, but he interrupted me. He told me that since he had no other option, he listened to his friend, and one night he asked the devil several times to help him. Will help. Until he fell asleep and began to dream of the levitating woman who tormented him when he was taking care of the sheep. In his dream, that woman approached him and told him that he had to go see her the next day in the countryside so that he could fulfill her request. When he woke up, he knew he had to do it, and even more so when he saw how my father was. With fear, he went to the place where he always saw that woman. At the same time, they sent him to take care of the sheep, and he waited a few minutes dying of fear. At the moment when he was determined to leave, he heard something between the trees, and when he squinted to see better, he realized that it was that woman slowly approaching him. Terror was taking over his legs, and he wanted to run away from there, but the desire to see our father was stronger, and even with tears in his eyes, he stayed. He told me that this woman looked 1,000 times more terrifying up close, that there were teeth in her eyes and that there was blood in her mouth, and she had a putrid smell. She was naked and her skin was almost greenish. The woman told him with an otherworldly voice that Satan had sent her, and that she would grant him a favor only if he gave her a human sacrifice. The money he needed was buried right there, but if he took it, he had to be aware that he had to give his sacrifice. But if he took it and did not give what the devil asked of him, then one of our brothers would die and go straight to hell. At the moment, I wanted to interrupt Beto. He told me that he would let him finish and continue with his story, telling me that since he had no idea what to do, he dug up the money, which was exactly what he wanted were needed for our father's operation, and although I was afraid, I knew I had to fulfill the devil's promise. He didn't want him to be alone with someone in his family. So he remembered when we had gone to look for Tommy, and he went again expecting to see the hitmen, to ask them for work, and thus fulfill his mission. Without him, he himself decided who to kill. Those people gave him the job and told him that he had to kill the owner of a grocery store in the city, because he had not wanted to pay the rent. Beto was determined to do it. He knew he had no choice. But when he was face to face with that person, he realized that it was going to cost him a lot. He was wearing a hood that hid his face, and with tears in his eyes, he told the man that he did not want to do it, but that he had no choice, and he took him to one of his warehouses and killed him, while all his workers listened. At the moment after my brother finished the last word, I yelled at him that if he was crazy, it was impossible for everything he was telling me to be real. I just couldn't believe it. My brother hugged me and started crying. He told me he was sorry, but he had no choice. It was the only way the devil wouldn't take someone from the family. Seeing how he was feeling, I told him not to worry, that he just had to stop going with those people who sent him to kill that poor man, and that we would act as if nothing had happened. We would go back to being the happy family we were before. Maybe in the past we didn't value our lives, but at that moment we realized that despite being poor and having a nagging grandmother, we had always been happy children. Beto promised me not to go back to those hitmen, and to be calm at home. I would make sure that none of that came to light. We went to sleep after the hug and promised never to mention anything. We were calmer, but that was because we didn't know what would happen next, something that even in the present continues to impact our lives. There were 2 weeks of peace. Everything had returned to normal, until one day my father sent my brother to buy corn in the center town. They were more or less 5 in the afternoon. An hour passed, and he didn't come back. 2, and nothing passed. Then 4, and that's when we decided to go look for him. But when we got to the downtown store, they told us that Beto had not been there. I got scared and started asking around, but nothing. Seeing me so worried, my brothers were totally confused. They told me to stay calm, that Beto had probably gone with a friend to play soccer or something like that. But I didn't listen to them. I just thought about the woman levitating in the field, the pact that my brother had made with Satan and in the cartel that lived in Bella Vista. Beto was in danger, and I did not want anything bad to happen to him. Since we no longer knew where after more searching, we returned home and my grandmother told me that Beto would probably come back drunk or with a good excuse. It seemed like she wasn't worried, but at night I heard her praying for him. The whole night passed and Beto didn't arrive. By that moment, I was already thinking the worst, and I was very afraid. I sat under a tree, far from home, and started to cry. I wasn't very religious, but I couldn't find any other option, so I started praying for my brother. But as I recited those words, I started to feel intense heat inside me, and it was not a good thing. I stopped the prayer, and after thinking for a while, I walked towards my house, hoping that when he arrived, my brother would already be there. And here what I expected came true, because Beto was in the room, being questioned by the grandmother, my father, and my brothers. I only heard him say that he was fine, that he had found an old friend and had invited him to his house in the city, and as night came he had to stay. Fourth, I asked him what had happened to him. I told him that I didn't believe the story that he had left with a friend. He looked at me sadly and told me that we should go out and talk. Upon reaching a quieter place, he told me that before reaching the downtown store, several hooded men intercepted him, covered his face, and took him up to a truck. Already at the destination, they began to hit him, but only in places where it would not be noticeable, such as the stomach, legs, and chest. Then they cut off one of his toes, and then poured alcohol on him. He says he has never felt so much pain in his life. He took off his shoe and showed me his foot. Then he lifted his shirt, and it was all covered in bruises. Inevitably, I started to cry, and he hugged me. He was my best friend, my brother, and it hurt me that he was going through all that. He tried to calm me down. He told me that nothing was happening, that it was already resolved. He told me that one of the heaviest members of the cartel had spoken to him, and had told him that he couldn't just disappear and act as if nothing had happened. If he had already entered that world, he could never leave, only dead. I could see his expression of fear, resignation, and sadness. That afternoon we lay down on the grass, knowing that nothing would ever be the same. Years passed and my grandmother died. She never knew that her grandson was part of the town's hitmen, and that was a relief. Then I came to live in the city and brought my father with me. I found a pretty decent job in a factory shoes, and my brother's the same. We left the past in that beautiful little ranch where one day we were born, all of us except Beto. He stayed in Bella Vista. He bought a house and never settled down until this day. He has children all over the town, and he continues working in the same thing. Whenever I visit him or he visits me, he tells me how the business is going, and the truth is that for many years his eyes no longer have shine. His lips are dry. He is simply not the same, but I will always love him. He will always be my brother, and I understand his change. Beto had no choice, and he did everything for his family, because he put my father before himself, and I will always be grateful for that. Many times he told me that he had returned to seeing the woman levitating near his house, and that he feared that one day she would come for him. He knew that being in that world, anything was possible. He had helped the people a lot. He gave groceries, even money to those most in need. The people there loved him very much and even nominated him to be president. But it never happened. His nickname was Metra, and he's still there. He has no choice. Who would say that he no longer owes anything to the devil, but to a cartel? And, well, that is the story of my family, more specifically my brother. Poverty took my mother from us, but thanks to him we have my father.